The views expressed in this interview are those of the individuals and do not reflect the official policy or position of the U.S. government, the Department of Defense, the U.S. Navy, or the Naval Postgraduate School. The Trident Room has been brought to you by the Naval Postgraduate School Alumni Association and Foundation. For questions, comments, and suggestions, please email us at tridentroompodcasthost@nps.edu and find us online at nps.edu/tridentroompodcast. Welcome to the Trident Room, brewer of stout conversation, unfiltered and on tap. In today's podcast, NPS student Mike Morris sits down and has a drink with Department Program Officer Paul Rasmussen.
Now, first of all, your last name, Rasmussen, right? Rasmussen. Everyone's like, Rasmussen, Rasman. I was like, I grew up with family friends, Rasmussens. So I feel like I'm saying it right. Yes? You've got to talk too here.
So yeah, that's been a source of interest throughout my entire life. I've had all kinds of nicknames you could imagine. Raspy, Raspberry, Raz. My dad, when he was a kid, was Moose for Rasmussen. But yeah, the correct pronunciation is Rasmussen.
Rasmussen. Oh my God, nobody says it right.
And
then.
the spelling is also interesting. I've had about 25 different spellings of the name, and I have name tags actually still from various commands I've been at with the spelling wrong. And for the most part, it's usually they put two S's in the front instead of two S's in the back. But over the years, I think my dad taught me this as well. He told me, there's a word that rhymes with bass that you can say there's no in Rasmussen. And then people usually get it.
So Rasmussen. Okay. And with the accent on the second syllable.
Rasmussen, yeah.
The Rasmussen.
Muss.
Yeah, muss. Well, I'm glad we cleared that up, and I hope people listen to that part and it makes it in because welcome to the Trident Room, Commander Paul Rasmussen. See, I just naturally carry it over from childhood.
No, thanks. Glad to be here.
So a little note for people who may be listening in today. You and I have met up, and we're recording this in my backyard on the patio in the open air and some sunshine with a little bit of shade, trying to respect some of our social distancing rules. So that being the case, we've cracked open a couple of lagers, and we're going to enjoy those and have a conversation. And so there might be other sounds and noises. I've got some chirpy birds. The squirrels like to fight in my backyard every now and then, especially on Fridays. Some of my neighbors are having yard work done, so we might hear blowers going on. It's all good. We won't let that bother us. We'll let the conversation shine through, I think, and we'll have a good time. So, Rasmussen. I'll just call you PR. No, I'm just kidding, sir.
No, that's a tough one. I struggle with that one, actually, is what do I call myself with students? Because for the most part, my students are all successful, mature, responsible, proven leaders. And as much as I want to have them call me Paul or my call sign, there is somewhat of a level of, kind of superior subordinate relationship that still exists. And so I think you've picked up on it. What I usually sign off on my emails is I figured out the way to do it is to put my initials.
Right.
And so I put my initials on most emails because I don't want to put Commander Rasmussen, but I also don't want to put Pablo or Paul. So it's that's a tough one. The student
it can
superior
be tough
relationship.
because your background is aviation as well, and so you have call signs. And so when I sign my emails, I sign off as Mo, M-O, and that's a call sign of mine. And but it just happens to fall in with a lot of the other services and communities that might sign off with initials. And so we consider Mo, to call me Mo, as kind of a professional call sign that can be used kind of throughout the ranks, on a professional relationship basis. But that is tricky for you, especially being here, you're program officer, and I kind of feel this might be the same for the other service representatives, is most of your students are, probably FGOs, and in a normal working relationship, if you're not their commander, it probably would be a first name basis.
That's exactly right. It's, especially again, going back to the clientele that I supervise, most people are, just as, if not as successful as I've been. And, and I want to treat them like peers. But at the same time, there are times when it's important to make sure that there's some sort of a boundaries, within the levels. But I also try as hard as I can, and I think it goes to my leadership style as well, is to not try and take my relationship and push things on the students, but rather let them know that I'm there for them. Because in reality, at the end of the day, for me, their success is what really matters, and it's not about me.
I've certainly sensed that from NPS in general, is that while there might be a professional superior subordinate relationship, that it's almost 100% about support. It's just all it's about enabling the student body to do their work here, and I think that's been the mission. And my viewpoint as a student, even distance learning so far, I've seen that be successful as a guidepost.
Yeah, for the average student, they need an initial vector. There's no question about it. When they walk here, when they arrive here to NPS, they feel like the character in Stranger in a Strange Land. Especially from the other services. This is the Navy. I'm not quite sure. I didn't know what to expect from the Navy, and so what are the traditions? What are the courtesies? What are the expectations? And so for if the leadership, including me, can just give them the initial vector and the guidance in the right direction, that's about all they need. And they tend to thrive. And the sad part is, after I initially meet the students at the beginning, because they're so autonomous and successful, that I really don't get to meet the students as much as I wish I could.
Sure. The opposite, I think, case with me is, whereas I came in with the initial struggle at the start of shelter in place and COVID. And now, granted, at the start, I was all chippy and cheery and helping you test out Microsoft Teams and whatnot. But then, things happen, conditions keep changing. For the first 2 weeks of shelter in place, it felt like we were camping. And then after that, it was, all right, what am I doing here? what is going on?
I agree with what you just said, and it was really surprising, to be honest, Mo, when that happened. In some respects, it was like the canary in the coal mine, meaning that we did a lot of work initially to change the direction of the aircraft carrier, from an in-residence type learning environment to, on a dime, turning the ship and going to full DL. And like you said, I think there was some novelty at first. But after a couple weeks, the novelty wore off very quickly. And I saw it myself at my house with my kids. Because, again, at first they were very excited. We were doing various home projects. We had certain schedules, and, the kids were cooking. The kids got some TV time during the day, and so on and so forth. But after a couple weeks, it became very monotonous. And then the reality started setting in that this isn't going to end anytime soon. And, these four walls that we have here are what we're going to be staring at for a long time. And when you reached out to me and kind of, I think if I can remember correctly, that was one of your comments, is it feels like the walls are caving in on me and I'm going crazy. Can I just get out of this place and, get some sort of, give me some hope?
I need something, some sort of human interaction beyond these four walls. That's exactly right.
And so, but it opened my eyes that, there's probably other people out there who are struggling in the same way. And so, at the exact same time you were reaching out, like I was noticing it in my kids, and I started kind of reshifting my focus on and my expectations as far as, what is the new right. And for my kids, that meant, kind of, letting them sleep in maybe a little more, letting them stay up maybe a little later, and having extra privileges, just so that would motivate them to do the, the regular stuff during the day. And with students, I'd love to talk about, various initiatives that you've helped me with and that other students have helped me kind of create to be able to connect with other human beings.
Well, you can see part of what I've done is I've kind of initiated desert rules for me, which is dress flamboyantly as possible at all given times, shave every 3 days or so, and, have a beer when I can, or, pour myself a bourbon, what have you. Just something to keep the sanity, and because I feel, a little bit of isolation away from the rest of the world, maybe kind of like a deployment. And so when I started treating it a little bit more like that and sort of using my deployment routine, if you will, some of those things that I would do on deployment have helped me kind of bring my mental state back around to like, okay, this can be a norm that is survivable for quite some time if I treat it like that.
No, yeah, I think I've used those similar words. You go on a 6-month deployment, and you have various expectations. You know it's going to be, it's going to be a long haul. You start establishing routines, but that same mentality though. Like what was his name, Alan Alda on MASH. You got to find out ways at the same time to again bring back that humanity and keep those connections up and remind each other that at the end of the day, we still all need some sort of connection, and we need some hope, and we need some laughter in our lives, right? Hawkeye, that was his name, Hawkeye.
Right. Yeah. So what are I know we've just like jumped straight into your time here at MPS, but what are some of those initiatives that you've seen students come up with to reconnect a little bit?
So it's really kind of just getting started, because the sad part about the current situation we're in is that especially back in April of 2020, we didn't really know what was gonna hurt us, right?
Right. For the first time, I think the assumption was no, you can't, instead
That's
of
right.
yes, you can.
That's right. And I remember somebody telling me, well, Paul, you better make sure you wear gloves when you go to the gas station, because if you touch that that nozzle that somebody else just touched, you might get sick and die. And it's like,
That's right. I when I fill up my gas tank, I'm going like,
I might die.
What am I going to do? What is this?
and so I think we've gotten over that, which is good. But it took a little while, and having some conversations with the dean of students, with the base CO, and with other people out there, let's stop talking about what we can't do, and let's find things that we can do. And so some of those initiatives that again came directly out of conversation with students were have conversations, and so in the in my department we started having not every week but kind of every other week, just having an open sessions online and invite students who are free, who want to come and talk. And I think most of the sessions I got probably 25% of the students or so, not everybody, but they you let somebody talk, and it's amazing what you hear, because so many times the leaders in general get credit for making things happen, but I tell you what, behind every leader is a good idea. And that idea, I'd say 9 times out of 10 doesn't come from the leader itself. It's just from talking to his people. And one of the examples was, I had a student who said he had 3 kids at home, and he was getting ready to take comprehensive exams, and he was very scared, that he was going to spend a year here at MPS only to fail his comprehensive exams because he had his kids bugging him while he was taking the test. So we talked about it, and we started asking some questions, and next thing you know, we turned our empty classrooms, on campus, and we turned them into study spaces, individual study spaces that a student could check out, come to the campus, clean the space up, and then have a quiet space where he or she could have uninterrupted time to get through through the day. And then that proved an amazing success. That initial effort, I think we had 9 students take their comprehensive exams in classrooms over a 6-day period, and the good news was every single one of them passed. Whereas
Wow.
that may or may not have happened in another world. And then since then, we took that good idea and we've completely expanded it to now doing it every day throughout the quarter. Students can sign up and just kind of get to a quiet place. And again, back to our story with you, Mo, what surprised me the most is it's not just the people who have kids at home who are using it. It's a lot of our single students who just need something different than their house. And they've found that when they do that, it's been a game changer.
Part of my compartmentalization is that work is at work and home is at home a lot of times, and I'm ashamed to say that I haven't taken advantage of that study space effort yet, only because I think I've sort of figured out my routine here a little bit better to create a productive environment in changing the environment that I have and modifying it. Is that study space effort like it's being run through NSA, if I'm not mistaken? Is it open to other students in other schools as well?
So as we speak, we are trying to, so it's not just NSA. What I was able to do was to, use a little bit of creative thinking, and maybe you can call it innovation, I don't know. but what gave me the idea was there was calls for students who wanted to or needed to use the laboratories on campus, and they created policies for how students can work on laboratories and do research. And I'm like, well, if students can go into laboratories on campus and do research, why can't they go into empty classrooms? And so the title of the initiative is kind of treating classrooms as laboratories. And so so it wasn't necessarily an NSA effort, but the classrooms as laboratories has been expanded to other departments. And I would expect probably by the end of this quarter, every single department on campus will be using their classrooms to let students study in.
Okay, and each department will probably be managing it in their own
Each
function.
department manages it, and sadly, there's a lieutenant who works for the dean of students who has to track every single person who goes into every single room. But he's a highly intelligent, high-speed lieutenant in the Navy who can do anything, and I think he's got a good handle on the process.
Good. We need people like that. I was a little concerned with the lieutenant who is helping you now while she's still here. She's also a TA for a professor in a couple of classes. I thought she was potentially also still a student, and I was like, what are you taking onto your plate right now? I was so concerned, but she's already graduated. I learned, and I was like, I just felt so bad that someone would take on so much while trying to be a student.
Well, but at the same time, I've seen students like that. There's been some students who've graduated who when they graduated, I'm like, you were a student, you were doing so much other stuff that I don't know how you found time to study. And Jessica, Kawamura, who you're talking about, she's one of those professional, capable, high-performing officers that you give them a tasking, and there's no limit to what they can do.
You might relate to this then. I'm one of those people that the more you put on my plate, I think the better I manage all of those taskings because it forces me to organize. If I'm left, unfortunately, in this environment, if I'm left at my own free will, I often don't manage my own schedule very well. I feel like I need a secretary often. But if I have so much that it feels overwhelming, I go, ooh, I need to organize my days. And I have so much going on. I want to make sure I get it done. And then I'll get everything done because I actually manage myself instead of asking somebody else to do it.
Yeah, no, and I think that's where the classrooms come in, is it allows people to kind of compartmentalize, and and you're at work, you need to get work done, where and this is something we're going to have to face as a society, frankly, because teleworking is here to stay. We're never going back. And how do you manage your workload with your home life and do a balance? And I think there's going to be some people who are going to be better than that at others.
What would you have done if you didn't join the Navy?
Ooh, that is a fantastic question. What I wish I had done if I hadn't joined the Navy was get a backpack and walk around the world. I think that would be a fun thing to do, is to walk around the world on a backpack and just, get to, come and go as you please, learn about how other people live, experience other cultures, and not necessarily, because one of the things nowadays that I don't necessarily like about my life is that so often I make decisions based on a schedule.
Sure.
And that's very constrictive, and so I almost wish that I had some sort of a lifestyle where I didn't have to live on a schedule.
So, I mean, if you think the alternate would be, hey, one thing is I want to put on a backpack and rock the world, has the Navy afforded you opportunities to experience, or even in your own personal life, maybe on leave, have you gone and experienced other cultures? What other cultures have you experienced?
So I have.
What impressions?
So I have, and again, you can't plan how your life's going to end up, but there's so many opportunities you get that form who you are. So as after my first operational tour, I actually was able to go serve as an exchange officer with the French Navy, and so I got to fly the Super Étendard off of the Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier, where I was the only American, in my squadron, and one of 3 Americans on the aircraft carrier.
You were flying off of their aircraft carrier.
I did.
I didn't know we did that.
We don't do it very much.
Okay.
You could probably put your hands up, and that's how many people have done this in the current United States Navy. But very quickly, I got to get through the stereotypes of the French, And we all know what they are as far as the French. But very quickly, I got to realize, what? At the end of the day, they are human beings just like we do, and they have a passion for life, and their pilots and their officers and enlisted were just as capable, if not more, than ours were.
I have a passion for their wine. Is that okay to say? Is that, or is that a stereotype?
Well, so most people probably know the United States Navy, since I think Prohibition, has been dry, and that's our official policy. And
like at sea.
At sea.
Okay,
that's right.
Because we're not dry right now. That's what I was like.
But on the French carrier, I was able to go out, fly a mission, come back, and land. And after a very short debrief, we would go to the one of 7, I think, bars they had on the aircraft carrier, and you could either have a nice glass of French wine or.
What was your favorite?
So my favorite is so if you haven't tried it before, there's 2 beers that I really enjoy, and they had them both on tap on the Charles de Gaulle. One was 1664, which is 1664.
Spell that for our listeners. No, I'm kidding.
I think it was 1664 was a French beer. It was a lager. And then there was also one that was a Belgian beer called Lef. That back when I was drinking it in 2002 and 3, it was not very well known. But I think Anheuser-Busch got bought out by the company that makes Lef. And so now you can find it in pretty much any liquor store.
Okay.
And no, I do not have any financial representation in either of those beers. But 1664 and Lef are 2 fantastic beverages.
Wow. Okay. So I'm gonna kind of shift gears here with you just a little bit. What are your passions? What has brought you to this point?
Well, so my passions when I grew up, I wanted to be a baseball player. That was my passion until about 12 years old, when I realized that I didn't quite have what it takes to become a baseball player.
Why is that?
Well, it's just that baseball coming at you at 50, 60, 70 miles an hour is, says it gets faster, it gets harder to hit, and especially when it's moving. And so I couldn't be Tony Gwynn or Pete Rose like I wanted to be back when I was a kid. But about that same time, though, on just one of the most random coincidences in life, there was a moment that happened that I think changed my life. And I was riding my bike. And I grew up in Santee, California. I was riding my bike, and a friend of mine who I played baseball with saw me, and we started hanging out for a little bit. And he's like, "Oh, I'm getting so tired of my paper route. I want to quit my paper route. Are you interested in having a paper route?" I was 13 at the time, and I had no money in my pocket. I'm like, "Well, how much money do you make?" And he's like, "Well, I get about $150, $200 a month." And my eyes just started popping wide open. I'm like,
at 12?
Yes,
that's a huge amount of money for a 12-year-old.
And so this was the summer between my 8th and 9th grade year. And I started having a paper route, and kind of looking back upon, that moment, I think that was one of the, the moments that really shaped the person that I've become, and some of the things that I believe in, and some of the things that help me succeed kind of today. If you think about it, especially kind of in an environment right now where we're in, where the days tend to blend into one, and you're not sure how you're going to get through each day. I think you just move forward. Because for 3 years I had a paper out for 3 years, and every single day for 3 years I had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, whether I wanted to or not.
Gross.
If I was sick, if I wasn't feeling good, if it was raining outside, if it was cold. I didn't get a choice. Just like the mail, the papers had to be delivered, and I think I was also somewhat lucky is that my parents weren't there to help. I had to get on my bicycle, again in the rain, cold, whatever it was, and
I said, "Hey, this is your paper route.
This is my paper route," and I had to go do it. And so I think you can extrapolate from that, and there's a lot of skills that apply to both military service. As well as, in times when things aren't as good as you want them to be. But again, kind of in thinking about it, kind of getting ready for our talk today, I kind of look back on it, though, and once you get past the poor me type stuff, I kind of realize what a gift that was. And that time I had, when I was riding my bicycle out, at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, I had the world to myself. There was nobody out there, no traffic. Everybody else was still sleeping.
That's so peaceful.
Exactly.
And you were experiencing that so young, too.
Exactly. And I got to see the sunrise, while I was doing the paper route. you know, and then when you get done with it, you know, at 6 o'clock, 6:30 in the morning, you know, you've already, you know, just like Admiral McRaven says, you know, make your bed should be the first thing you do in the morning, so you feel some sort of accomplishment. I had that at a very young age, and that passion of getting up and doing something rather than, you know.
Oh, how formative! Wow. I feel that way if I get up and like run a mandatory 5K and then go get breakfast. I feel great for the rest of the day, and yet for some reason I don't like apply that to my personal well-being in life. I don't make the connection for some reason.
Oh, but I'm just kind of you know, now think about it. You know, I've done 27 years in the military, and I've done some pretty amazing, cool things. Some of the stuff that I remember the most actually were some flights I had in various places throughout the world where I just looked around and got to see some of the most, you know, whether it's a sunrise from 30,000 feet or a sunset from 30,000 feet. And it kind of was those same types of feeling of just being able to, you know, enjoy the moment and enjoy the surroundings out there. You know, I was the mini boss of an aircraft carrier.
I want to hear about that because I don't know what a mini boss does. I'm in the Air Force, so please.
Well, so I'll come back to the moment I was gonna share, but the mini boss of an aircraft carrier works with the air boss as his number 2, and basically runs the flight deck of the aircraft carrier. You have 650 people who serve under you in your department who run the flight deck movement of the planes, the catapults and arresting gear.
Maybe I relate to that exactly then, because I'm an airfield operations officer by trade.
Very similar.
But you're in a much more complicated, compact environment, obviously. On a
well,
carrier.
it is, and I mean, if I remember correctly, you're not an aviator.
No, not an aviator.
So the mini boss and an air boss are kind of, you know, in the job description, you are aviators, because the people who work for you, they are experts and professionals, and they know how to run the flight deck. Where you really come in the most is in your interactions with the air crew.
And we would have often a supervisor of flying, a SOF in the Air Force, who would be doing that, and may often be located with the air traffic controllers, for example, in the tower, monitoring the flying mission in support of the operation of the airfield. So
Yeah.
I would relate it to that in my head.
No, that's exactly right. You know, they had us up there for, you know, when things didn't go right. You know, when things go right, I mean, it just happens like clockwork, and it's like a ballet.
You just get to sit there.
That's right. But when things don't go right, you know, you need to kind of put yourself in the shoes of the person flying the plane who's having a problem, and try and understand, you know, what they're dealing with, and then translate that to the captain of the ship, translate it to the people on the flight deck to be able to help them come down.
Then that's exactly what I'm thinking of. Yes. So I'm not that, but I work with people who do that. Okay, in the Air Force. Okay, great.
But you know, and where people really understand what the mini boss of the air boss is, if you've ever seen the movie Top Gun.
Right.
There's a couple of very famous scenes where Tom Cruise, the typical aviator,
He
you know,
spills his coffee all over
asks
himself.
for a flyby, and then the guy says negative, Ghost Rider, the pattern is full, and he, you know, as a good aviator does, he ignores it and then continues on there, and then he spills the coffee on the air boss.
Right.
So that was me. I was the guy getting my coffee spilled on my shirt.
This might relate to the moment you want to bring up, but were there moments you remember when starkly in your memory when things weren't going right, that you were under all that pressure?
Oh, no question about it. There's many stories about that. No question about it. You know, so when I used to fly airplanes, I'd say I had a malfunction or probably about once every 10 flights. Okay. And I had a no kidding emergency probably every 30, 40 flights or so. That was on average for any aviator. But when you're working in the tower of an aircraft carrier, pretty much once an hour, you're dealing with something. But there were a couple that were more memorable than others. There was a poor kid one night who just couldn't figure out how to get his plane on board the flight deck, and fortunately, one of my jobs as well as the mini boss air boss was to make sure that we had gas airborne, so that if a pilot was having trouble, we can get him more gas. And this guy must have gone around 15, 20 times. And we were trying to get him gas. But the specific moment, though, that made me panic was when we were trying to launch another tanker to help him out, the catapults broke. Oh, and it was the catapult that's on the flight deck in the landing area. So now I have a broke catapult in the landing area and a plane that's about to run out of gas.
Oh my God.
And so, yeah, that was a little bit of a moment of panic. But fortunately, you know, all of the professionals who were working were able to figure out what was wrong with the catapult and get the plane, you know, airborne, clear the landing area, and you know, and eventually, probably, I want to say after 2 hours of this kid trying to land, I think we finally got him on board.
The discipline on a ship like that in order to make it run as smoothly as it does, and then to recover and react and adapt when it's not running smoothly, which is probably 80% of the time, or maybe even more. Like, such a complicated operation, things are going to go wrong constantly, you know, or be different every day, every single time you go out. How does that relate to maybe discipline at an institution like this in the classroom? It's not, you know, we're not losing lives here necessarily, or we're not launching aircraft. You know, people aren't so compact. In fact, right now we have to spread out, right? But how do you relate that experience to what you do here?
So there are some relations, no question about it. You know, I think the comparison I would make. So on an aircraft carrier, you have two commands. You have the ship's company under one command of an 06, who's the captain of the ship, and then you have the air wing, who is under another 06, who you know, and there's about 3,000 people in the ship and 2,000 people in the air wing, and they have to work together. So
in that tight space.
In that tight space, and
That's
you know,
incredible.
and the ship's company provides a service, if you will, to the air wing, and I think I'd relate that to MPS as far as, you know, we have a staff and faculty who provide the infrastructure of the institution of NPS, so that when the customer, you know, the student, comes here, you know, our job is to make things, you know, as streamlined as possible, so you aren't seeing the circus music behind the scenes going on to make it look easy. And the
Although sometimes students feel better when they hear some of that circus music. It's good to know that it's going on, because it's reassuring that the band is playing. You know, if we can kind of hear the band through the walls, oh, the band is playing, they're handling it, I can go on and about. When we don't hear the circus music, we wonder if things are happening. What is happening up
Is somebody
there?
going to fix this?
Yeah.
No, but that's just it. Is on an aircraft carrier, no question about it. You know, you watch the videos of a plane getting catapulted off the front of the aircraft carrier, and another video of a plane landing, and you know, and we've gotten to the point where we've made it look easy, but no kidding. It's kind of cliche, but it takes 2,000 people doing exactly, you know, not kind of what they're supposed to do, but the 2,000 people doing exactly what they're supposed to do, so that the shooter can push that button to launch the aircraft.
It's probably one of the most dangerous places to work in the Navy.
Yeah, I'd say, but you know, for, you know, to a credit to the Navy and other services who do similar stuff, you know, we have the proper protocols in place so that, you know, for the most part, you know, people don't get hurt. That's the good news. It happens sometimes, but at NPS, you know, I would argue that very similarly there are, you know, so we just launched a new quarter, right? And we got, I don't know how we did it, but we got roughly 520 new students here and said goodbye to about 450 other ones. And for the most part, I don't know how you did it either. I don't know how we did it, but we did it, and it's the same thing. There's whatever 1,000 people at NPS who are each doing individual jobs, who collectively together, you know, make it so that you as the student can, you know, sit in the classroom on day one, ready to learn and focus, you know, on your education.
It's astounding. I'm astounded. I really am. Yeah, I'm not being facetious.
You know, the registrar, admissions, student services, the ed techs, the academic associates, you know, the personnel offices, your analysis coordinators, and
oh yeah, all of our favorite parts. What advice might you give to your 23-year-old self? And you could consider that some of the students we have here today are fresh out of college experiences, ensigns, lieutenants, you know, Air Force lieutenants, if you will. What advice would you give to that 23-year-old?
Well, the first thing that jumps out is open your ears, you know, before you open your mouth. And we've told a couple stories about that one already.
Where are you from? Sorry.
So I grew up in Santee, California,
Okay,
which is
Santee.
a suburb of San Diego.
All right, so I was going to say, like, open your ears. Like,
Open your ears before your mouth, I think, is some very good advice. But I think what we touched on before, I think would be more appropriate as better advice to somebody young, and that's don't be afraid to say yes, and get out of your comfort zone, because you're afraid of the unknown. Because the unknown is what makes you, and that's where you get to test yourself, and that's what you get to see what you're made of, and in the end of it, it's actually amazing what you can accomplish and what you get to be able to do. I could have instead of being an exchange officer of the French Navy, I could have been very comfortable and I flew F-18, so I could have been an F-18 instructor, and I knew exactly what that tour would have been like. And how it worked, and frankly, it might have been better for my career. But by trying something different and getting out of my comfort zone, I think it's made me the person I am today. And I could tell you 20 other stories.
don't regret that, do you?
Where I tried something different, and said yes instead of saying no, and I'd say that it's made all the difference.
PR, thank you. Let's crack another, huh? No.
All right.
All right.
It is only 10 a.m.
No, come on. Oh my gosh. Well, as we're sitting back down with you and cracked open another beer that we're now 1/3 into, you had a story you wanted to tell about being mini boss. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, yeah. So, being the mini boss of an aircraft carrier, my position is up on the 10th floor above the flight deck, and it's got a pretty fantastic view for obvious reasons. Kind of similar to some of the views I remember as a kid. I remember, one particular day, kind of on the 4th month of a 7-month cruise, when, everybody was feeling very comfortable. Everything was working everybody was working together very smoothly, and there was the aircraft carrier captain would always set the carrier up at the sunset so that he could see the sunset. And that was good for me because I got the same view he got, just 1 floor above him.
What power? I'm sorry, but like the world is yours when you get to do that, right?
Yeah, there is something to that, of out in kind of unregulated waters. And so anyway, that night, I was just remember it was very calm. Luckily, everything was going very well. And we had a little iPod in the tower, and we put on Pink Floyd, The Wall, and we were listening to The Wall in between cycles of landings and recoverings. And we had about a half hour, 40 minutes. And I just remember sitting there, just kind of staring out into the water, and it was a perfectly clear night. The sun was, like I said, right there out in front of me, and and it just was one of the most beautiful, serene settings I've ever remembered.
What a wonderfully peaceful moment that must have just filled you up. And and as you said, you were listening to The Wall. Oh man.
No, it was good. It was good. I got to all the stresses were able to be put aside for a little bit, and just got to appreciate where I was at. And again, in the words of Roger Waters, I got to be comfortably numb.
Oh gosh. Well, and that sunset moment really brings you back to your childhood moments of seeing the sun rise as a paperboy. But what'd you do after your paperboy? You were in Navy ROTC in college.
That's right. So I was Naval ROTC in college, and the Navy was gracious enough to pay for my tuition, but they didn't give me any spending money. And man,
you needed to fill those pockets.
I did.
So
I
you're
did.
Making that 3.0.
The beer bottles weren't being filled, with my good looks. So I was very fortunate. To this day, I always like to tell people that I've had 3 jobs. I've been in the Navy for 27 years. I was a paperboy for 3 years, and in between those 2, I worked at a restaurant called the Sizzler for I think
Sizzler.
7 years.
That doesn't even sound like a real restaurant name. I think you're making this up. That is totally out of a movie. But they serve salads, right? The Sizzler.
The Sizzler's motto was steak, seafood, salad, Sizzler.
Oh my god.
And no, it was.
You knocked the microphone or the headphones off of my head with that one.
No, it was great. And upon reflection, kind of looking back on my time at the Sizzler, I think it really, it wasn't planned, but it was very fortunate that I had that time there, because it was there that I learned that if I want to do well, I need to make sure the people around me are happy and satisfied, and I'm meeting their needs. And if somebody was to ask me, how I lead as a military officer, I strongly proclaim that I unconsciously, to kind of use the servant leadership style. I never
Just from your experience.
Well, I think that's what I was formed to be, and I didn't even realize it. And it wasn't on purpose, right? It was just I learned very quickly that when I said no to a task that was given to me, because I was a busboy first and a dishwasher, and I had to do the jobs that nobody else wanted to do. When a drink was spilled, when a customer needed extra napkins, or when a little kid unfortunately missed the toilet in the bathroom, guess who got called to clean it up?
Of course.
And and the more I said yes, I started realizing very quickly the more that the waiters and waitresses that I was helping tipped me at the end of the night.
Okay, so their tips would kind of partially flow into your pocket as well. Remember that when you're out eating, ladies and gentlemen, that your servers are also taking care of their bussers. But I
think that translates, though, right, into the qualities of a good, whether it's a soldier, sailor, airman, or officer. For those of us that when asked to do something and say no, you quickly build up a reputation of somebody that maybe doesn't like to take on extra duties.
Well, I wanted to ask you a little bit about what servant leadership means to you, but then you bring up a salient point of, instead of saying no where you have room to, say yes.
That's right. Because by saying yes, you really never know what you're going to get. There's so many opportunities that you get by saying yes. And again, that applies to today's circumstances, I think. The dean of students, I know, he's very fond of saying, instead of focusing on what we can't do, let's instead focus on what we can do.
Oh, that's right. Of course, yeah, because we're in this world of no, so let's find out where the yeses are. That's sure, and I think that applies to your regular life as well. Even if you say no to your friends all the time, you're gonna have less friends. But if you say yes where you can, and you spend time with people in your life, and that can apply to your job as well. And when you apply, your abilities and passions and capabilities to friendships or job or anything, and your passion, and you bring that to it, yes, gets easier over time too, I think.
I think it does. And in applying that to leadership, I heard it from I worked at Stratcom as an 04, and an 06 was my boss. And one of his famous phrases to us was, "How do we get to yes, Paul? Let's find a way to get to yes." That may not be the exact answer to the original question, but through leadership and through communication, there's so many possibilities out there, and I'll never forget that.
So many of those formative experiences you had when you were young and as a teenager, and then in college as well, have those helped you cope with the current environment?
Well, I think they have. So after I was a busboy, fortunately, when I got into college and turned 18, I got to be a server, and to be a server at a restaurant, I think you have to be able to recognize what the customer is looking for in their experience, and that's different for all people. And you have to be able to put yourself in their shoes and kind of try and understand that. And I think that that experience taught me empathy.
I was just going to say, you've just defined empathy and emotional intelligence.
I think so. And so today, again, what we talked about earlier is I really don't know what everybody else is going through, but if I can consciously take a step back and try and ask myself or ask somebody I'm dealing with, what's your life like? What are you dealing with? I think that starts to communication and starts to trying to find a way to get to yes for whatever the issue may be.
I think it's important too to recognize that empathy and emotional intelligence is a skill that can be practiced, just like your regular intelligence academically. If you don't practice it, it kind of goes to waste. I find that with my Russian language skills. Don't tell my DLI teachers, please. But if you practice that over time and you continue to put that into work, you kind of have to hone those skills. You can't. It's not a one-time thing, and you're good at it forever.
No. And some of us are luckier than others. Some of us, our parents in our childhood, were taught that in our households, but and others that maybe they aren't. But I really think that my time working at the Sizzler, I really learned empathy, emotional intelligence, and it helped me. But a story I'd love to tell you though, I'll never forget this, and this is kind of one of the my life's lessons that I've come to realize how important it is. It happened to me actually when I was 40 years old.
You're over 40?
I'm just barely over 40 right now. Oh,
goodness.
Just barely over 40. But 10 years ago, do the math. 10 years ago, I was a baseball coach in Rhode Island of my son's Little League team. And it was a bunch of 8 and 9-year-olds. And one day I'm sitting there on the bench and I'm just kind of, just listening to what the kids are saying. And they're starting to make fun of this one kid. Because there was this kid, who didn't have very good emotional intelligence and didn't fit in very well, was kind of awkward, kind of acted out, and didn't react very well to others. And one of the kids said, "Man, what's that guy's problem? Why is he always kind of, why is he always making such a big deal of things?" And then I'll never forget it. What one of the other boys said, and it was a 9-year-old boy, mind you. And the 9-year-old boy says, he says, "Well, my dad tells me that I should never judge other people because I don't know what happens inside their house."
9?
A 9-year-old boy said that, and it probably didn't strike me at the time, but I've never forgotten that moment. And what he was describing was empathy, right? He was trying to
exactly. You don't know that word at 9 years old, but
you don't know what other people are going through. You don't know, what struggles they're facing, what challenges they're going through, what successes they're going through, how they're, what they're dealing with. And if you assume that you know what they're going through, I think that conversation is over before it starts. But if you actually, try and understand what that person's going through, listen to what they say, have a conversation mostly where you listen rather than talk, I think that's a critical skill of a leader.
We talked about some resiliency here and what you do as a program officer at NPS for the National Security Affairs Department. What's the dumbest thing you've done professionally, and how did it turn out?
Well, I've done a lot of dumb things. There's no question about it. I could probably have a top 10 list and we could fill up a half an hour just of this podcast,
Which is
talking
what
about
happens.
Those stories. But one that I think is very salient in today's environment, I think is one that I'll share with you. So I flew F-18s, and for better or for worse, our kind of best practice was that after we landed the planes, we would go right to the fueling pits, and we'd fuel the planes while the engines were still running.
Okay.
Exactly.
That's right.
We decided that was best practice. Well, so anyway, as you can imagine, that doesn't just happen in a split second. So it takes.
Are you staying on board?
I'm sitting in the cockpit they're called the fuel pits, and there's some poor young E3 puts a hose into my plane, and we wait about 25 minutes with the engines running until it fuels up the plane.
Are you doing this on the carrier?
Sometimes, yes.
Oh my God.
I'm more the story I'm talking about was actually back at the field.
Okay.
Back at the field at NAS Lemoore, and I was with another. I was a lieutenant, so an 03, and I was with another lieutenant. We had just done a mission together, and so naturally we need to fill that time up with entertaining each other.
Oh, okay. I see where this is going. Please.
So we're talking to each other on a secure channel, and we're just having fun. And one thing leads to another, and we start basically bad mouthing one of our sister squadrons in the air wing. They were going through some tough times, and their planes were not working so well, and actually we were loaning them some of our planes because our maintenance officer was doing some very good work. One thing led to another, and basically each of us were calling that squadron, clowns and buffoons, and what's their problem, and man, why can't they just be like us? And what we didn't know was one of their pilots flying one of our jets happened to stumble across our channel listened to our whole conversation and pushed the relay switch, relayed our whole conversation to their ready room, and their whole squadron got to hear us basically bad-mouthing them, including their commanding officer.
No.
So next thing you know, after the 20-30 minutes
And the
of
next
sitting
3
in the hot
rounds
pits,
were on you.
well, so we had to do the walk of shame over to their squadron spaces and stand at attention and get a nice talking to from their commanding officer about our words.
Sure.
But I think there's a lesson though to be had for listeners here, especially in today's environment, whether it's talking or I think more importantly, writing electronically. I think I don't want to say that we shouldn't express ourselves, but you need to make sure when you think something, and then you say something or you write something, what is your mom going to think about it, right?
Well, and always remember that your words are interpreted differently in writing, and emotion doesn't translate in an email. And usually the receiver translates it in the negative sense if there is an emotional translation to be made.
I think that's exactly right. Because if I remember right, that commander, who was the commander of that squadron, is now a 2 or 3 star admiral. So obviously he wasn't a bad commanding officer.
So you're not getting promoted ever again.
Hell.
I'm just kidding.
Not because of that story. That story limited. No, just. But that was a formative moment, I think, for me, where I made a mistake, but I learned a valuable lesson.
So you don't regret it. No, maybe you would. Looking back, maybe you wouldn't have done what you did. It sounds like.
I don't know.
Oh, that's okay.
What do they say? If you don't have something nice to say, don't say it, right?
Right. Yeah. So I mean, we can all learn.
If you don't have something nice to tweet, don't tweet it.
Don't. Whoa, we might cut that. What can other professions learn from yours? I mean, I know you learned a lot from being a paperboy or a server, but what do you think a paperboy or a server could learn from you and what you do now? Is that too deep?
Well, I haven't thought about that too much, but just a couple things jumping out at me. What I do now, I believe, what's my end product? I think my end product is to create people who think about what they do. I don't know what our mission statement is off the top of my head, but I would say that the Naval Postgraduate School, especially in the National Security Affairs departments, is we create critical and strategic, analysts. I'm not sure if that would apply to a paperboy necessarily, but I think
Perhaps not.
I think that in general, I think it's very good to learn and to take some time to think. Because the more you learn and the more you think, the better you sound when you speak and you write.
Well, so maybe that paperboy, like you did when you were younger, can learn to reflect in the quiet and to take those moments that you get to think and to consider life, even as young as it might be at 12 years old, starting a paper route, and learn to reflect on yourself and carry that forward through life. Maybe a paperboy could learn that from what you're talking about.
I agree. I agree, but I also think though that so many times in life, you think you have things figured out, and you're comfortable, but if you have an attitude of not being able to admit you're wrong and that you don't know everything, that's when I think that moment comes that you realize that there's so much more out there, whether it's actual knowledge or whether it's actually somebody else's opinions, somebody else's viewpoints, somebody else's feelings. Just so many times we think we fall into the bad habit of thinking we know everything.
Certainly. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for taking the time out of your day and joining me on the Trident Room podcast. Unfortunately, today we didn't make it into the Trident Room proper, but that's going to be a possibility in the future. I hope we get to open up soon. The podcast will continue and will supplement, and we're going to be here to have these interesting conversations. So thank you again for being my guest today. and for having these beers with me and having this conversation. You've been extremely open, and I'm so appreciative of that. So thank you.
Thanks for joining us in the Trident Room. This episode was recorded on July 10th, 2020. For more information about today's guests and topics, please visit the show notes. The Trident Room has been brought to you by the Naval Postgraduate School Alumni Association and Foundation. For questions, comments, and suggestions, please email us at tridentroompodcasthost@nps.edu and find us online at nps.edu/tridentroompodcast. In today's podcast, NPS student Joe Novak sits down and has a drink with oceanographer Mara Orskanen.